There we go. Finally one of these big ones. Oh yeah, it's a beauty. Oh, what a beautiful fish. Alright guys, welcome back to the Bass Feed. If you're tuning into this video, you're looking for a little help trying to get some of these bigger smallmouth to bite during the worst times in summer. When the bite's good, you're not on YouTube looking for tips on how to get these fish to bite. You're looking for tips when the bite is god awful and you're getting skunked. Now on those days is when you're looking for help. And those are the days that I'm referring to in this video. Now I have the unfortunate disadvantage of having a very difficult work schedule and family life. I don't have the ability to go fishing in the mornings, and I don't take any time off of work. I have to be in the office every single morning. So by the time I get to fishing, even though I do get a fair amount of time to fish, it's early afternoon or late afternoon all the way till about 6 p.m. This is the worst time, oftentimes the worst time to try to catch some smallmouth in the summer. But that has given me a lot of experience dealing with these terrible, terrible bites. And I can still come up with fish on the worst of days. Now these are the baits that I use to continue to catch during these situations. Now in these clips, you'll find a few different techniques. And unfortunately, I don't record every time I go out. Otherwise, I'd have a lot of different types of baits on here that you can see examples that catch big fish. But I'm gonna just go ahead and tell you what the best baits are. So the first baits you'll notice in this series of clips is a shaky head. Now this is sort of new to me. I didn't really start throwing this until this year, and I have found it to be pretty effective. Now there's days where other baits work a lot better. There's also days where seemingly these fish won't bite unless it's a shaky head. Now, again, these baits are what I use when it's tough. So this particular shaky head setup that I use is a very finesse setup. I use an owner ultra head in about a 3/16 size, and I find that to be the best finesse shaky head setup. Now obviously you don't need to go owner, but something similar would probably work well for you. And I just use a 6-inch robo worm. I don't go real big unless I'm on some feeding fish. Then I'll use a brighter color and a bigger size. But when I'm just trying to get bit and it's tough, I go with like 6-inch. Green pumpkin is my go-to color. Honestly, a lot of what I explain here is what I go with in terms of color. Now I'm going to touch on colors here for just a moment. When it's tough, when it's real tough, I think more color is going to hurt you.
Some big smallies.
And this is my personal opinion. Again, remembering that I only fish really during the worst hours of the day. I find a difference if I throw something bright, colorful, with a lot of flake, and these fish are actually turned off by it. In fact, oftentimes they'll see the bait and go the other way, and they will actually move. They will move because they're intimidated by it, they don't like it, and they literally move. I have the benefit of watching this on forward-facing sonar since I have it this year, and it's been a big learning experience for me on how these fish react to different baits. And I can't tell you how important color is, and I never realized that until this year, but it is huge, and I've been doing really well this summer now that I've kind of put together this pattern. Green pumpkin is hands down the best color to use across the board, and that's on any bait. A craw when using a creature, a beaver style bait, Senkos, shaky head worms, drop shot baits, jigs. I mean all of it. Setting aside, things like deep cranks or jerk baits, I almost exclusively throw green pumpkin when I know the bite is difficult. Now it's up to you to determine whether the bite's difficult. So having that said, I'm moving on to the next baits here. In this video you'll see plenty of drop shot catches, and that's probably my go-to in the summer when it's tough. And I use sort of I say something ribbed, green pumpkin in color, only about 3, maybe 3.5 inches, and that's all you need on a drop shot. Now when the fish are willing to chase a little bit, or you're finding fish isolated, not around bait balls, things like that, I could switch to like a little paddle tail swim bait, and still keeping it 3-inch, and just dropping it down on them, or dragging it along where fish are roaming. Again, green pumpkin, and that will get bit as well. So those are my favorite style of drop shot. Honestly, I have no reason to use anything else. My next setup that I want to discuss, which I don't know if I have clips on this video, but I just use like a round head jig, 1/4 ounce to 1/2 ounce depending on depth, and I'll literally just use a little a paddle tail of some sort and just drop it on these fish, or drop it around bait balls. And I keep it simple. Drop it down. If they don't pick it up on the bottom, as soon as it hits bottom, you can tell by that slack line, reel it up. Simple as that. Just reel it up slowly. A lot of these fish will not bite until they're chasing, and when you're reeling that in at a constant pace, they'll oftentimes hit it in the first 5 seconds of reeling it in, sometimes 10, depending on how far they want to chase it before they bite it. But honestly, if they don't bite it by then, those fish aren't going to bite anyway. So don't sit on those fish, and move on. And if you just keep that in mind when you're moving through these areas, just let it drop. As soon as it hits bottom, let it set for a second, and they could be staring at it. They'll sit there and stare at it, or they'll swirl around it while it's sitting on bottom. As soon as you start reeling it, and just a steady reel back, if they don't hit it, move on. And if you cover more water that way, it's just better to get on the fish that are willing to bite. It's not efficient to sit on fish that won't bite. So that's a good way to cover water, even if you don't have forward-facing sonar. If you think you're in the area of these fish, just do that in a number of different spots, along weed lines or around structure, and that's a pretty darn good technique. Yeah, of course, jigs. I love jigs, especially football heads for smallmouth, and you can't beat it. Just keep it simple. A lot of times I'll use a finesse jig or a smaller jig with a small baby rage and just drag it. You just got to maintain that bottom contact, drag it through some rocks where you think these fish could be snooping around for craw. And I focus on that technique in rocks because I like feeling the contact as I'm dragging. And these fish love baits that bounce off the rocks. And you know that goes for a wobblehead too. It's a very similar setup, same type of deal, but that even more important that you stay out of the weeds because those get gummed up. Those swinging wobbleheads get gummed up with weeds way too easy. So I stick with that only in like areas where it's next to 100% rock. And same type of deal. Maintain bottom contact. Pick your weight based on that. If you're not feeling the bottom enough when you're doing a slow reel, then you got to go heavier. Let that determine what weight you go with. And if you only have certain weights, then focus on the water that suits that weight. So if you only got a half-ounce football head, you're going to want to stay generally pretty shallow. So that way you can get that action to get those strikes you're looking for. Because if you start throwing that in 20 foot of water and slow reeling it, that thing will be swimming. You're essentially swimming it, and that's not the reaction bite you're looking for. You want it to be bounced through the rocks, so you want to go heavier. So if you don't have a variety of weights, then focus on the water that fits the weight that you have. Another bait that's just amazing and that shines this time of year is a Senko. And
fish, 3.5 pounds.
I would still
totally
go with some of these other techniques, but depending on what you're fishing. If you're fishing vertical structure or dock pilings, things like that, nothing beats a Senko, especially if it's about 10 foot or less of water. If it's a little weedy, not everything works in those particular instances. Pick up a Senko, throw it in there, and you can throw it in pretty nasty areas and get it out all right because as long as you Texas rig it, it's perfect. I prefer a 5-inch, and just don't get far from that green pumpkin or natural color idea. Don't get that bright flake. Unless that's all you throw, and you are fishing mornings when the bite's a little better. On the better bites, throw something brighter, that's great. And those fish will travel an extra 5 feet, 10 feet to go get it. That's great. Now when I'm referring to these tough bites, I'm talking tough. And I find that these fish are intimidated by all that color. And I go with straight pumpkin or watermelon. I'm just going to have a few colors handy and throw that when the bite is tough, and that's that. Same with drop shot. Don't do anything fancy, because if you're like me, you're only throwing a drop shot because the bite is crappy. So no reason to get all crazy with the colors. Stick with something subtle, natural, and that'll go a long ways to get a few extra bites.
Nice long fish.
And a lot of these clips you see here are using those baits, and with great success. And honestly, I have a whole slew of clips that I haven't even gone through of me terrorizing Lake Washington with these exact same baits. Now, it's a whole nother story, is figuring out when to throw what in what situation. And maybe I'll get into that in my next video. But for now, I just want to get you guys on the right baits and sending you guys in the right direction to catch more smallmouth in the summer. And honestly, on these tougher days of the year, when the bite's slow, what's nice about it is oftentimes it's the biggest fish that are still biting if you have the right presentation. So you could have only a 4-fish day, but 3 out of the 4 are over 3 pounds. It happens, and it is nice. It is a fun time of year for that. It also makes it to where you appreciate those bites a little more when they come, because you could go an hour without a bite, and once you get bit, I mean, that thing's rip and drag. And you guys know how these smallmouth work. They're rip and drag. And honestly, a lot of these techniques, you're going to want to use lighter line and a spinning reel. Maybe I should touch on that just for a moment. Let me go down the list. Shaky head. I don't use anything bigger than 10 or 12. Drop shot. Nothing bigger than 8, preferably 6, depending on what you're fishing around. Round head. I stick with about 10. Jig, 14-ish. Probably no more, depending on what you're throwing around. If the water's colored and you're throwing around some rough stuff, you can even go up to 20. So there you go, guys, and I hope I've helped a little bit, but and sorry the video is a little late. We only got about 3 weeks of summer left. It would have been nice to put out this video a few weeks ago, so you guys can be sent in the right direction to get a little bit more action this summer. But if any of y'all were struggling this summer, just keep this video in mind, or maybe rewatch it going into next summer. I just won a tournament 2 weeks ago doing exactly what I'm explaining here. Now, I'm not going into specific baits, as long as you got the general gist of things. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I appreciate you, and I hope I've helped some of y'all out. And if you guys find this helpful, leave a like and leave a comment. You know, if you catch one next week or this week and it's because of this video, come back and drop a comment so I know I'm helping y'all out. I'd appreciate that. Alright, thanks again, fellas. Tight lines.